the illustrious panelists for this session, who are leaders in business, academia, urban planning, arts and humanities, will share their insights on the global dynamics in the context of urbanization. May I invite Mr. Amitabh Kant, CEO, Niti Aayog, Government of India, Mr. Anand Mahindra, Chairman Mahindra Group, Mr. Antoni Vives, CEO at the City Transformation Agency Barcelona and former Deputy Mayor Barcelona, Ms. Meenakshi Srinivasan, Chair, New York Life, New York City Landmarks Preservation Commission, and Mr. Eytan Schwartz, CEO, Tel Aviv Global.
Thank you. And it's a great honor to moderate this panel of, as you say, of city leaders, people who all have a passion for our urban space. I think I am surrounded by people who need no introduction. So I will keep this very, very short. It's a great honor that we, of course, have our chairman, Anand Mahindra, with us today, as well as Commissioner Amitabh Kant, who is a man who is synonymous with the I would say not only the branding, but the actual delivery of a modern India. And so as the CEO of Niti Aayog today, we're anxious to hear his views on the future and the direction of our urban space. With us on my left, of course, Antoni Vives, who we know for many years from the city of Barcelona, which is clearly, I think you saw in the video at the beginning, one of the leaders in creating a new urban space in Europe, and has been engaged not only there, but around the world now, including of course, here in India. And then Meenakshi, it's a great pleasure to have you back home again as a Delhiite, but one who has now created and literally put her mark on the face of the city of the world, New York City, and so is the chairwoman of the New York City Landmark Preservation Commission to speak to that. And of course, Eytan, we are all, now anxious to experience all of that nightlife of Tel Aviv that you have kindly presented us with. So we will bring you out one of these evenings. So thank you, gentlemen, lady. It's a great pleasure. I think we could just start off. I mean, this topic of urbanization next, it speaks to the future, it speaks to the trends. And I'll just, one or two very quick facts. As was said, 65 million people a year coming to cities. 440 cities provide 50% of global growth. Those are all of our cities. Those are the Indian cities, the Chinese cities, the Asian and Middle Eastern cities. So this is kind of where the action is. But with all of that growth, you get a lot of stress. So 1.6 billion people lack affordable housing today. And I should note that 60% of the urban space that we need by the year 2030 has yet to be built. 60% of the space that we need by 2030 doesn't exist today. So we have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work to do also to manage our cities going forward. Annually, catastrophes cost the world about $200 to $300 billion worth of costs in urban resilience catastrophes, whether it's water or fire or what have you. So future-proofing our cities is an issue. People, we have 350 million migrants, cross-border migrants, 90% of whom live in cities. And so anybody who lives in the age of Brexit and Donald Trump has sort of asked that question. And so, who are these people? How do they contribute? Importantly, how do we integrate them? And finally, jobs. We've had a lot of discussion about jobs and technology today, but the McKinsey Global Institute would say that 50% of all human activities that are performed today can be automated. 50% of all human activities today can be automated. So that means we're all going to learn a lot of new things. And how are we going to do that? And what is going to happen to the people who don't know how to do those things? What will be those new jobs, and how will we introduce them? So a lot of stress here. So we have to make choices. We have to make good choices. We have to make thoughtful choices about our land, about our buildings, about how we use our technology, and maybe most importantly about our people and how we liberate their potential. So with that as introduction, I'd love to start, if I could, Amitabh, with a bit of a discussion from yourself. And so how do you see the future, the vision for urbanization for India going forward?
Jonathan, every minute we speak here in India, there are 30 Indians who are moving from rural areas to urban areas. And, if you go by the latest McKinsey study, in the next 4 to 5 decades, you'll see 700 million Indians getting into the process of urbanization. And this really implies that the challenge for India is to create 2.5 Americas by 2050. Now, so obviously India will do more urbanization in the next 5 decades than what it has done in the last 5,000 years. The challenge is that when America urbanized, land, gas, and water were all cheaply available. So America had the luxury of living in New Jersey, traveling to New York, guzzling gas, having limousines, creating cities like Atlanta where 99% of the people travel by car. So Americans created the most polluting cities in the world. We don't have that luxury. So we'll have to create cities which are more compact, which are more dense, which are on the back of public transportation, which are based on recycling of water, recycling of waste, and yet have to be extremely livable. And therefore, the challenge for India really is, and India has been an extremely reluctant urbanizer. But to my mind, that's a huge advantage. The huge advantage is that we've moved away. We must move away from sprawling cities, embed our cities with public transportation, and that requires a lot of money in terms of infrastructure. Do really good spatial planning, but also use technology to leapfrog. And the opportunity for India is that it's the only country in the world with 1 billion biometrics. It's the only country in the world with 1 billion mobile. So virtually, you can manage your cities on the back of good mobile telephony and on a real-time basis. The challenge really is for India, to my mind, is that Indians must learn the art of monetization of land values. Urbanization cannot move forward in India till we do not monetize land value. For every bit of infrastructure that we create, we must learn the art of creating value out of it. That's number one. Number two, I think the regulations of municipalities are very outdated. And because they are outdated, there's no concept of special purpose vehicles which will enable you to do that monetization. So every new urbanization process that is done under the 74th Amendment, under a provision called 243Q, which has enabled you to create industrial cities. And to my mind, it's not possible for government to create or do all urbanization in future. And if government does it, it'll do shoddy urbanization. So the important thing is that it must delegate, decentralize, and allow a much greater level of private sector play in the process of urbanization. And this would necessitate some legislative changes which will enable private sector to pool land, to do their own master planning, to do their own trunk infrastructure, and to be able to monetize land values and create cities of the future. That's one. Number two is, on the existing cities, I think there's a huge challenge about raising revenues by enhancing tariffs. There are cities in India, there's huge civilizational cities like India, like Varanasi, where water rates and electricity bills haven't been raised for the last 2 decades. I mean, you can't run a city till you don't charge market prices. And therefore, people are dying for good services. They want to pay the price, they want cities to be better managed. And therefore, it's necessary that services are provided at the right market prices. So the challenge for India has just begun. And it's important that we do it on the back of good planning, on the back of good legislation, on the back of good technology, on the back of good public transportation, and on the back of good recycling of water and good recycling of waste, which will enable better livability. I'm not touching on creativity, I'm not talking about culture, which are very essential component of great living. But for India right now is quality of infrastructure, which is critical.
Thank you. Eytan, if I could building on a bit of what Amitabh was just saying. So you spoke a lot about the creativity of Tel Aviv and the spirit. How do we make that link from creativity and culture and heritage to the quality of infrastructure, or economic quality, economic development? And what is Tel Aviv doing to make that connection? Sort of how does all of this creativity actually help improve the quality of infrastructure and the quality of the city and its economy?
Well, if I may, actually, it was the reverse. Tel Aviv in the 1980s was on the verge of bankruptcy. The infrastructure was rotten. Nothing worked. The city was in debt. And the decision that the city made, and of course, the young people left. When you formed the family, you would leave, and only really old populations remained in Tel Aviv, or lower income populations. And it is the center of the country. I mean, the basic assets are all there. It was just mismanagement of the funding and a lack of investment. And the city made a decision 15 years ago to reinvest in the infrastructure, and essentially, for 5 to 7 years, probably I would say the mayor, who's been mayor for 18 years, was the most hated person in the city, because everybody had a grievance with the mayor one way or another. Their road was blocked, the road was open, something wasn't functioning, but he said, guys, patience. It needs patience. It's not a quick win. We have to redo everything. When the infrastructure was improved, when the cities became livable, fun, safe, walkable, people started returning. So the creativity came the other way around. It was always the artistic center of Israel. It was always a cultural center, but there was something about when the city became much more livable that people started returning. And I'll say one thing about the city, because it's so small and it's very walkable, we walk everywhere. And that's really one thing that to me is very apparent, but again, it's a totally different culture. We walk everywhere, and everything happens in the street. I reached the point where I'm about to sell my car. I don't want it. I don't need it. I walk to work. If it's a bit more of a distance, I take a bicycle. We're now introducing a car sharing program. I don't want to have a car. There's no need for me to have a car. Having a car is selfish. I'm taking up the space with one car of so many people or bicycles that could be on the road, and there's no reason to have it. But that's a luxury you can have in a small city. But it's also a luxury you can have when walking on the street is so fun, and knowing that you're going to meet people on the street is so fun, and it's a safe street to walk on. That's when creative people start returning to the cities, and that's what happened in the city of Tel Aviv.
That's great to know. I mean, I'd love to pursue that question, especially about where did all the money come from in the first place to fix the city?
Quite honestly, we started charging what you just said. We started collecting tax. We did a good collection. So the person that wasn't furious about the mayor for opening up his street was furious for the mayor for collecting tax for the first time in an efficient way. But we started collecting. We started giving tickets for parking on the sidewalk. There was a culture of people parking on the sidewalk with complete chaos, and it was known that like after 11 p.m. you can just park on the sidewalk because you're going out to a bar. And no, you'd come home at 2 o'clock in the morning, you'd leave the bar, smack, there was a ticket on your window. So people, there was like I would say it was like gambling. You'd say, okay, I'll leave my car. There are chances of 1 out of 5 that'll be ticketed. So it's worth my while to leave my car on the sidewalk, because the fine, I'll deal with it if I'm given a fine for every 5 times I leave my car on the sidewalk. But then when you start getting a fine every time you leave your car on the sidewalk, and we're chasing you with the lawyers to pay your fines, then it took 5 years, it took 7 years. I mean, we're not the fastest people, Israelis, but eventually we get the point. So people realize you can't leave your car on the sidewalk anymore. So when you erase chaos and there's law and order in the streets, and you create a very pleasant environment, that's when people, I say, go back to enjoying the city. And most of our taxes, in the case of Israel, we have a different legal system than most places. The city tax is based mainly on businesses. There are a lot of businesses in the city, and that's their main source of income.
Okay, that's great. I love that story, and I think I'm going to use it again. So Anand, if I could turn to you a bit. One of the other things that we've talked, we're here at the Mahindra World City, but we're also, as I said, in the era of deglobalization, as people say, or this economic nationalism. How do these things go together? Or what is your vision for the relevance of globalization in the context of what appear to be a lot of cross currents, a lot of turbulence, a lot of people saying we want less globalization?
One of the reasons I'm very allergic to coming on a panel with Amitabh is he usually leaves you with nothing to say when he's done. And I do agree with a lot of what he says. Two of the points that he stressed on, I'm going to expand on, and that was really about decentralization. That was one of the themes that ran across his comments. And empowerment. He talked about private participation. I don't think he meant the corporate sector in a sense, but it was about empowerment of people. So to go back to your question, Jonathan, it's not so much deglobalization that worries me. I could go on about deglobalization and what the world, according to Trump, might mean. And I think I'll skip that now. I think the real trend we have to watch out for is the death of the megalopolis. That concept, to my mind, has to be put to rest. Somehow, as we went past when we went through the past decades, the model was that the city is what made a country productive. You got enormous gains in productivity when you moved from rural areas to cities. Urbanization is what caused modernity. If you look back, there was no productivity gains for decades, and for centuries sometimes, in rural cities. It was urbanization that created productivity. And the larger the city became, the more productive you were. Somehow that model is broken. You alluded to it a lot in your opening comments. First of all, keeping up with infrastructure needs is becoming impossible. Keeping up with rural-urban migration is becoming an enormous social problem. And we're not China. We don't run like China where you can flick a switch and tell people you will move in this month from the countryside to the city and back. So rural-urban migration in India is a problem that cannot be sorted out the way China has done. When you look at economically what's happening to cities, frankly speaking, infrastructure itself is breaking down the productivity gains. The Gini coefficient, in fact, has become worse in cities with globalization. So you're getting divisions into ghettos, which are dividing people apart. And the social pressures where people are losing a sense of identity and community is breaking identities apart. So I'm afraid nothing is working. One of the things I wrote about, in fact, in a recent McKinsey publication was that we have to reimagine how India is going to urbanize. And we have to use that concept of decentralization. So rather than imagining the world as a network of megalopolises, New York connected to London, to Tel Aviv, to Paris, and that's what the vision of our world is. I think first of all in India we've got to realize our goal is not to create those kind of urban agglomerations which will match up to the mega cities of the future. We have to decentralize. So what happens to productivity then? Are we going to give that up? Well, that's where I think the death of distance, as Francis Cairncross put it so eloquently, comes to our aid. You don't have to sacrifice productivity anymore. Digital technologies and communication allow you, if you're sitting in a village, using 3D printing technology, you can manufacture automotive parts for my vehicles, which, by the way, Eytan, I keep hoping to sell, even though you vowed never to buy a car. I'm hoping we will be able to sell some of them and need some spare parts. But they might be made right in the village where I might need that spare part. Or an artisan might upgrade their output and their products using 3D printing and directly sell to the world or to the other cities in India. So I think we have to challenge the notion that productivity cannot be improved in smaller urban agglomerations. I think Mahindra is putting its money where its mouth is by creating these kinds of smaller agglomerations. Mahindra World City, Jaipur and Chennai are experiments in that direction. And I want to end with the idea of community. I know Amitabh said he didn't have enough time to talk about that, but he said that's important. We've learned the hard way. Anita and Sangeeta will remember when we put up Mahindra World City, Chennai. To be honest, we did it as if we were playing SimCity, you know, a kind of game that we were playing, and here's your work area, here's your living area, here's the hospital, and it was just a Lego set of things that we had put together. We forgot about how do you build community? What are the intangibles you build? How do you get people to come in and build a nightlife? It's not by just plotting things on a map. And I would dare say Sangeeta's goal right now is to build those. So what's as important for her as building a hospital? It's creating a marathon, which occurs in Mahindra World City, Chennai, to draw people together. Creating a signature artistic event. Those are the kinds of things that we have to do, which will restore a sense of community and identity. And those are best done in smaller agglomerations. You had a chart, I think, Eytan, of citizen to citizen was your last item. The most critical. One of the investments I've made personally is in a small startup called Local Circles here, which is about citizen-to-citizen contact to bring transparency and accountability in governance. That, combined with smaller agglomerations and the restoration of community, plus technology that allows you to be global and productive, I think that's where the future of cities lie. So may 1,000 cities bloom is what I say.
Thank you. Very well put. And I wanted to build on one of the things you said, is how to reimagine the city and sort of reimagine the community. I think that's a very clear and specific and vision of what it could be and what it could look like. And we, of course, have two people here with us who are in the business of reimagining cities. So if I could start with you, Meenakshi, as you do your work on looking at the fabric of where we have in the cities today and imagining what could it be. How do you think about that? What is your design philosophy, if you will?
Well, first of all, I'm very happy to be here and to talk about my experience in New York. And so New York it's the global capital of the city, of the world. And it has a booming economy. Its population is on the rise. And perhaps many people think it doesn't have inherent issues that continue to plague it, but it does. And I just want to talk a little bit about those. But some of the conversations I've been hearing about whether they should be smaller cities or larger cities, in the US context, I think there's great opportunity to densify existing urban centers and really capitalize on the existing infrastructure as well as its building stock. I think one of the things that we can think about in terms of the existing environment is that it reflects the history of places and embodies the identity of cities and metropolises. So I think it has a real connection to its population and citizens. And that's something that's difficult to replicate when you talk about new centers. And I think the suburbanization of America sort of speaks to that. So New York has always had a culture of innovation, of progress, of reinvention, and of evolution. And it continues to modernize. It's about 400 years old, and it has different layers of history. And it continues to modernize, but its existing built fabric hasn't been put to the wayside, but it continues to be protected. And over the last 50 years, since protections were put in place for historic sites and neighborhoods, we have seen that in fact, the preservation of these neighborhoods, they stabilize neighborhoods, they spur economic development, they promote tourism, education, recreation, welfare, and they foster civic pride. So I think that in a case like New York, which needs to be competitive, how do you balance both existing fabric and allow growth to take place? And I want to give an example of New York Central Business District, which is East Midtown. It's the largest central business district in the world, and in the eastern portion, it has about 60 million square feet of office development, about 250,000 jobs, and it's home to many of the Fortune 500 companies. The area developed in the turn of the 20th century, when the Grand Central Terminal, which is the major transportation hub and infrastructure of New York City, connecting to all the 5 boroughs, but also to the region, particularly to the north and along the east coast of commercial centers. So it developed in the turn of the century, and right now it's doing very well, but when we think about in the future, how does it remain competitive? And I think for city planners, we have to contend with 2 issues. One is that the district itself has no land, and in fact, that's one of the issues. Businesses are coming to the area, but they're relocating outside of New York because there's no space to build. The second thing is that the existing building stock is old. It's about 100 years old, and it may not be able to accommodate modern commercial needs and also be able to incorporate modern technologies and building systems. So one of the things that New York City did was to think about how do we plan for the future of this area to remain competitive, and how do we balance both growth and preservation. And so it really was an integrated strategy, and my agency, what we were tasked to do was look at the area and identify historic resources and analyze them. And we concluded that within a very small area, which is about 75 blocks, we already had 38 buildings that were landmarked, and they represented 3 development phases in the area. We did further analysis and identified 12 additional buildings that we felt should be protected. And that would make a sum total of 50 buildings within the small area, which would really ensure that for future generations, you will always be able to see within its streetscape the legibility of the history of the area. At the same time, the Department of City Planning was looking at incentives to really allow for the redevelopment of some of these older buildings. And that was done by allowing more density that could be attained for building, which would allow these buildings that were obsolete to be demolished and rebuilt for Class A office buildings. And this was done through incentives, including being able to transfer development potential from protected buildings, or to actually enter into a fund. And the fund would pay not only for the preservation of these historic buildings, but also pay for the infrastructure enhancements both to the infrastructure and to the public realm. And I think this was a good model for a city to, for other cities to look at when you have a much more integrated approach to planning. It touches upon many of the things that have been talked about today: the need for improvement of infrastructure, capitalizing on our existing assets, thinking about the human factor and how people relate to their environments. And so I just wanted to share that with you. And perhaps a little bit later we can talk about housing, which is another issue that's pretty important.
Well, thank you. I mean, that gives us a very clear picture of how, again, the redevelopment process can work in a very established and a historic area, but one with still a lot of growth potential. So you don't want to sacrifice the one for the other. But let me turn to Antonio, and we talk a bit about technology. I mean, I know we do lots of things in Barcelona, but you're particularly identified with technology. And Eytan gave us the Pixar dogs example. Let me give you another movie, WALL-E. Some of you remember WALL-E as the spaceship Earth, where everybody sort of sits around in chairs and uses their technology to interact with each other, and has some harmful social externalities. Everybody seems to be very large. And they don't exercise very much, and they're isolated, and they have dysfunctional relationships. How do we avoid that? I mean, is that dystopia a risk, or what is, because we've said a lot about the good parts of technology, but are there some concerns that our digitization of our online life takes away from our actual physical life?
I don't know what happened when printing books were started, when the books started to run around the place. Perhaps there were some people that fought them. Could anyone imagine our life without printed books today? No. Can anyone imagine life without this today? No. Amitabh said something very clever and very clear. Why should we avoid using this when today this produces, perhaps this thing that I wear in my pocket is the weapon, the biggest weapon of mass creation that we have ever thought to have? I mean, that's stupid. You remember during the Industrial Revolution, we had those, I don't know the word for that in English, Luddites, those people, Luddites, throwing the steam machines to the river. I think that discussing about these things is a waste of time. It is true that we have to learn how to use them, but we've been talking about 3D printing. One of the things that we did and that we are spreading all over the place in the world is we produced what we call athenaeums of fabrications. An athenaeum of fabrication is a place that we put as an administration together with the private sector, We put some 3D printers, and we teach people, no matter the age, no matter the training, to use the 3D printers. You cannot imagine the success in the poorest and the richest quarters of Barcelona. If you ever came to Barcelona, just underneath Camp Nou, if you like football, Camp Nou is a place where my team plays, the best team in the world plays. Well, very close to that, you have one of the biggest atheneums of fabrication. Why the word atheneum? When my grandfather was a mechanic. He wasn't trained, he didn't go to school, but he had a social conscience, and he went to the Athenaeum once he finished his job. The Athenaeum was a place in which some people taught him to write and read. So why shouldn't we do the same thing today? So digitalization is exactly the contrary of what these people against it says. I want to say something about urbanization. I'm the last one speaking now, so I have the chance of... the first thing, we're in India. I work here roughly 1 week per month. Thanks God you're not China. Thanks God you're not China. I'm not because I don't admire the Chinese, but I think that the Chinese copied the worst things of the Western world. When you decide to build city with asparagus, I call them, you are perhaps solving your thirst and hunger of today, but you're generating the social divide of tomorrow. Today, those fellows coming from the countryside, they remember where they come from. Their sons and daughters, their grandsons and granddaughters, they know that they live in the banlieue. And today we have to divide the world into two hemispheres, not the developed world and the underdeveloped world. Can anyone tell me in this country what is developed and underdeveloped? This country that produces the biggest number of IT engineers, is this a developing country? Come on. We have to divide the world between urbanized world and under-urbanized world. And we have under-urbanization in Paris. Yes, we have it. La banlieue is an under-urbanized world. And we have under-urbanization here. The problem that we have is that anyone sees that even though we know all these figures, any presentation that we have, in 20 years' time, 80% of the population, blah, 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 why don't we do anything? Cities are two things. Cities are obsolescent factories of living, and we have to invest money in that, public money and private money. I'm sorry, I don't agree with these people that say that we don't have to invest in metro because metro is not economically sound. I mean, is economically sound, parks and recreation maintenance. I think that we have to change a little bit our mentality. And the other thing is these cities that are converted into provisional camps of refugees. That's what our immigrants are, thinking that they live in a transition period, but we stabilize them. And they are there for generations, and we create this horrible suburban world. And then we think all of a sudden that we cannot solve it. That's false. And I want to go back to what Amitabh Kant said before. Now that we have everyone identified, now that we can track them, now that we know what they want, can't we start talking to them directly? For the first time in humankind history, we can talk directly to the person, to that specific person, and then we can add up them all to generate the necessary budget to solve that social problem. That had never happened before, and we keep thinking about the budgeting of things as we did it 30, 40, 100 years ago. That's a real mistake. So you know what? We need new clients, and that's why we need, and I finish with this, that's why we need to train our mayors, our commissioners, our city officials, even our empresarios, I'm sorry for my English, our empresarios, to become good clients. Good clients. One of people say, why did Barcelona have such a success? Yeah, it's true. We punch much above our weight, much above our weight. We know it. We knew it. And I do punch myself much above my own weight, even though I'm big, much above my own weight. Why? because we tried to become good clients of the best vendors of the world. When I see screens, when I see a vendor selling me screens and a wonderful control room, I say goodbye. I'm not interested. Please, Mr. Vendor, talk to me, and some people know me, I all repeat this, talk to me about Miss Sita. Miss Sita, this lady, 75 years old, living in slum in Mumbai. We know where she is. Now, do we know whether she can afford her housing? Do we know whether she opens every day or closes her refrigerator? Because we can know that. Do we know whether she walks? Do we know whether she takes her pill? We can know that. We can know that today. Why don't we start talking about Miss Sita with the Mr. Mahindras of the world? We need intelligent developers. We're talking about this building cities to last. We need developers to last also. Developers to last. Smart city need smart developer. I love this fractality here. We need fractal developments, smart fractal developments, little by little, making money, monetizing, yes, but then little by little, growing little by little, and making sure that we work with what we are. You have a tremendous civilization. You are one of the most amazing cultures on earth. Work with it. I cannot teach you anything. No one of us. And then you have these Anglo-Saxons dressed in black, telling you things, and then you build kind of Los Angeles. I kill myself. I mean, it's horrible. And on the other hand, you have a huge opportunity, and you have to go for it. That's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. As someone who commutes between Los Angeles and Shanghai, I'm slightly concerned. let me turn back to you, Amitabh. I mean, you've heard. We've started the debate. We've heard of these ideas, and building on what Tony just said. How do we help people become better clients or better decision makers? But what is the role of? How do we make these decisions? And what are some of your observations on governance at this point?
I've traveled to Barcelona, and I've seen what a remarkable city Antonio has made it into. It's a great city because it's got history, it's got civilization, but it's also a very contemporary society because they've used public transportation, they've used power grid, they've used walking, cycling, they've used the power of good data analytics, and therefore it's a fascinating city which has blended technology, cycling, walking with its civilization. And in contrast, I've thought, when Mahindra first started its World City in Chennai, it was ahead of its time, actually. And I've traveled several times to Mahindra city, Jaipur, and it's a great example of what private sector can achieve in India. And it's demonstrated that it's capable of doing unique planning, unique infrastructure, attracting the best companies, the best talent, if you are able to create great quality infrastructure. My view is that in India, you need hundreds of Mahindra World Cities, and you need hundreds of entrepreneurs to blossom here. And urbanization has just begun. It's going to continue unabated. If you don't do it in a planned manner, it will happen in a very unplanned manner. As it is happening when you travel from here to Jaipur, you see all the way it's urbanization in a very unsustainable, unplanned manner. And therefore, we must do it in a very planned manner. We must do it in a manner where we allow really good planning to come in and good infrastructure to be created. And when we do, one of the great advantages of India is that India has just begun this process of infrastructure. So today, if you were to transport goods from the northern part of India, Delhi to Mumbai, it takes 14 days for goods to reach. But by 2018, you will have the dedicated freight corridor, which will enable goods to be put in 14 hours. And this will open vast areas, and actually right now in the Delhi-Mumbai corridor, there are 5 new cities which are under construction. Well planned, They have good planning, good infrastructure, public transportation embedded with all the smart technology in it. So there's really good opportunity. And what these cities will do, and what the new 100 smart cities and the Amrit programs, we have two major programs now. India did not have an urbanization program for many, many years. So right now, this new government has brought in two programs. One is the 100 smart cities of India, and it's brought in a new Amrit program for urbanization. What these programs will do is, one is that existing cities are being smartened up, and smartened up not in terms of mere technology, but in how to create better infrastructure. How do we make them better livable cities? That's number one. And number two, and how do we use technology in all these areas to leapfrog? And second is that on the back of the Delhi-Mumbai corridor and the Calcutta-Amritsar corridor, we are opening up vast areas, and on the Chennai-Bangalore corridor, we'll open up vast areas which will enable new urbanization to take place. And when you do new urbanization, it's possible for you to plan, embed your cities with new technology, and do really compact, dense. And I'm a real believer in good, compact, dense development on the back of good transportation. And my belief is that if you do that good, compact planner, unfortunately, our urban planners have all been trained in America. And they're all living on outdated, dead processes of planning. The American model of urbanization is dead. And that, the earlier we bury it, the better it is in India. And I think many of the lessons of urbanization come from the eastern part of the world, and not the western part of the world. They come from Singapore in water management. They come from a city called Kitakyushu in Japan, where everything is recycled, where the women of which drove industrialization, but which the Dokai Bay on which it is based became absolutely yellow from blue. So the women of Japan rose in revolt, and Meitei worked with them to make it the most recyclable city. They come from Yokohama, which was able to reduce its waste by almost 40%. One single mayor brought the waste reduction down to 40%. So my belief is that India has this great opportunity. It's been a reluctant urbanizer. It's this great opportunity to learn from all these great innovative lessons from across the world and use technology. No other country in the world has this ability to have billion biometrics and a billion mobile phones to be able to crack urbanization on a real-time basis and allow data analytics and financial inclusion to take place. So India can't follow the model of the Western world. That model is dead. And if you were to follow that model, the world would require 4 planet Earth. Whether we like it or not, we have one planet Earth. And therefore, India has this opportunity to do innovative and sustainable urbanization, which can then become the model for the rest of the world.
Thank you. And a call for all of our developers to think about that death of American urbanization and creation of the new model. So Anand, the new model. I mean, you have a background actually which is a little bit atypical perhaps. I mean, in the sense I understand your undergraduate degree included photography and other liberal arts. And you, of course, Mahindra's done a lot in design. You know, you guys remember I read your speech to the Institute in Ahmedabad, design, the commencement speech, and speaking about the XUV 500 and as well as the revolutions that are needed in public space in Mumbai. I'm just curious, what do you see? I mean, what are the opportunities for you as a developer, as an impresario, to change the language of design, to follow, if you will, what Amitabh's calling for, a new version that draws on the history and traditions of the East, but explores them and develops them in a contemporary and a future-looking context?
I think it's somewhat better known now that my undergraduate degree was in filmmaking, but I have a deeper and darker secret actually, which is that before I went for my filmmaking degree, I was studying architecture in Mumbai, in the JJ School of Architecture, and very serendipitously it went on strike, so I was forced to apply abroad. Otherwise, I would have been a very poor architect today. But I remember when I did go to college and I was studying filmmaking, this was at Harvard, and they have a wonderful graduate school of design called the Gund School. Beautiful building, but it's concrete, very Corbusier-like. I used to hang around there just because of my my penchant for architecture. And what I saw really influenced my worldview, if you will, about how communities spring up. These kids had carols, as they call them, on each of these levels. It was shaped like a piano, that building, different levels. And each one was very geometrically allotted a space. After the first month of a semester, you couldn't recognize it because the people who were given a carol had changed its shape. There were potted plants coming out of somewhere, there were bizarre sculptures emerging elsewhere, and it began to look like a kind of clean slum. It was not the kind of orderly environment that people had envisioned. And what I recognized there as a young 18-year-old has stayed with me today. You know, spaces don't conquer people. People adapt and change the spaces they live in. That's always struck me, which is why the whole theme of decentralization and empowerment, I think, makes sense to me. It applies to everything we do in design. So coming back to your question, Jonathan, what do I think has to happen? Yes, I agree with Amitabh that we have to find a new model, but I'm going to be a little bit of an apologist for one part of America, and that was this remarkable woman called Jane Jacobs. And anyone who studied architecture or planning knows her. And that poor lady argued vociferously against the urban model that you railed against. When urban renewal came to New York and they created these concrete landscapes, they were beautiful on paper, and what happened? They became scenes of crime because they were not populated at night. And Jane Jacobs used Boston's North End to define how cities should be populated. They should be dense. In fact, we should not be arguing against Dharavi. We should be looking at what we can do with the slum of Dharavi to improve its amenities, not change its shape. Because she said there is no crime in the North End because Big Mama is watching out of the balcony and knows if anyone's going to abduct any kid. Whereas in any geometrically planned neighborhood, Big Mama wouldn't be able to see anyone. And so density, compactness create stuff. And I was a little disappointed, Meenakshi, you didn't mention Brooklyn when you were talking about New York. You have the future of the universe in New York. I mean, I would argue with you, Eytan, that before you think Tel Aviv is king of the heap, look at Brooklyn. Brooklyn within New York is, in my opinion, one of the most innovative and the biggest startup center in the world. You've got some competition, Eytan. You know, it's not going to be a walkthrough for you. So how did New York create this? I think it's because artists went there. And your danger now is that if you start creating more domino-type developments that you've got, the Dumbos of the world, and the artists get squeezed out of that place, Brooklyn will lose its ability to be a startup nation. So coming back to your point, what's the real essence of design? It's going back to people. It's starting with communities. That is the essence of design, not a T-square or a drafting board. It's not about Corbusier and Chandigarh. It's about the North End. It's about Brooklyn in its original form. We have to start with people, and I dare say Arun, Anita, Sangeeta, all of us learned that the hard way. The next Mahindra World City is going to be built around communities, and then we will design the structures around them.
Just about Brooklyn. Brooklyn really is a sort of phenomenon right now, and I think people have seen certain neighborhoods which have really become tourist attractions as well. So it's the largest borough in New York City and is very varied. It has neighborhoods which are very comparable to neighborhoods in Manhattan. And there are other areas which have grown organically, including artists that have come there. And it was previously manufacturing space. And with people leaving these buildings empty, they've been taken over by artists. But one thing I would say is that there's organic trends that will happen. And Soho had artists, and that what brought people there. Those same artists went to Chelsea. The same artists went to Williamsburg. Now Williamsburg has people in the tech sector. They have people who work in Manhattan, wealthy people, and the artists have moved to Bushwick. I think this kind of phenomenon is hard to to sort of freeze in time. But I want to talk about one thing in terms of Brooklyn and planning for Brooklyn. Is that, and it's related to infrastructure as well, is that there's always been this trend in New York that everybody goes and works in Manhattan. The ones who have the resources stay in Manhattan, can walk to work, but others live in the other 4 boroughs. The real strategy change is to think about places of employment outside of Manhattan, and to provide infrastructure in those boroughs. So the interesting thing about Brooklyn is that, in fact, you have great potential for economic centers along the waterfront. There are neighborhoods like Sunset Park, there's Williamsburg, and this waterfront actually goes all the way to Queens, connecting major satellites in Queens as well. The problem is that the infrastructure always takes you through Manhattan. And so how do you think about developing infrastructure in a borough, which, as many have pointed out, going below grade is very, very expensive, and also allow for new communities where there's available land, where people can both work and live. And so one of the proposals right now is called BQX, which is a light rail that will run from one area along the waterfront of Brooklyn, Sunset Park, and it'll go all the way around the waterfront of Brooklyn into the waterfront of Queens. And these neighborhoods have already started developing. And so this, the BQX is a way of, with much less intervention in terms of infrastructure and much less disruption in terms of to communities that already exist there, is going to provide, or hopes to provide, access to people all between Brooklyn and Queens, and also between different neighborhoods in Brooklyn. And so I think, I hadn't forgotten about Brooklyn, but that borough will grow as well, and probably is now, and it will be the future of New York.
Now, I don't want to neglect the people, as in the people. So I would love to give everybody a chance to ask 1 or 2 questions, but very quickly before we do that, I mean, I'll ask if Tony and Eytan, could you give one idea that you think would make a huge difference in the planning and development and design of our cities? I mean, I'll just put that there as a question, but I know you also had a comment you wanted to make. So.
I'm going to tell you a story, a real one, about what Mr. Mahindra said some minutes ago. We made a huge mistake in Barcelona. Some of you have been to Barcelona. You know that we have some quarters up in the hill. Some of them are very poor. So we pretend to be very good architects. In fact, yesterday we knew that the new Pritzker Prize is awarded to a group of Catalan architects. I'm a Catalan, for if you don't notice it. So we decided to build wonderful social housing for those people living in those slums up in the hills. So those families had been living together for 60 years. It was one of the biggest mistakes I made in my life, because, yes, we gave them a very nice apartment, but we broke forever their social life. So what we did right after that, when we realized what we did, we decided not to do that anymore, and we decided to work on the recuperation of all those slums, and house by house, I don't know how to say that, barrack by, I don't know how to say that, you can imagine, brick by brick, recuperating those places, because the social bonds are much more important than any good architect. Then, of course, you need good architects to do that, and you need all the technology that you can imagine. But first of all, the social bonds. And the second one, I want to just very, very quickly, there are 10 core in this new society that we have to learn to manage. I'm going to list them all. We have to learn how to co-work. We have to learn how to co-care. How to, I'm going to say, co-leisuring. We have to generate leisure together. Co-learning, co-teaching, co-growing, co-creating, co-designing, co-building, and co-living. This is what the digital world is bringing to us, and this is the kind of society that we here in India can be perhaps the first in the whole earth to really develop and being able to touch it.
I think that's a great spur to action. I'm just going to note that most urban planners are men, and perhaps having a few more women in the profession might help to have a little bit more of that listening part. Anyway, Eytan, what's your thought? How are you going to change the world?
I'll tell you a short story. My wife comes from a very special, unique type of habitat called kibbutz. I don't know if you've heard about the kibbutz. Some people are nodding. It was an amazing Israeli invention, a collective society, probably around maybe 400 or 500 families that lived together on a collective society. First it was agricultural, then some of them developed industry. They had nothing of their own, and it was completely shared. We abandoned that model. The mayor of Tel Aviv is also from a kibbutz, and what he is trying to do now in this ultra-capitalist city is create what he calls the kibbutz in the city. Because the kibbutz provides the community, and you mentioned this so many times, three basic things which we all want. The best services on earth, for cheap or for free, and everything within walking distance. If you have those three conditions, you're a happy human being. So what we are thinking of now in Tel Aviv is, because land is so scarce, and resources are so scarce, why do we need to own everything on our own when we could be sharing? Yesterday I wanted to press my shirt. So I called the reception. I said, can I have an iron? They said, no, but if you go down the floor, there's an ironing board there. That's brilliant. Why do I need an iron in my house? I use it once a week. Why don't I have an iron sharing with my neighbors? And today in Tel Aviv, in community centers, we will give you an iron. We will give you a camping tent. We will give you all those things that men like to buy and never use, right? A drill. How many times do you use the drill after you buy it? Once in a lifetime. So there's a communal drill. You take it, you hang the picture, and you give it back, and you don't need to take up space. That's why we're using more and more car sharing schemes. So the more we think about sharing, I think that's the future of cities. A lot of people talk about the necessity of a subway, of transit between places. Let's start thinking about buildings as a community. The elevator is the subway, right? Instead of going from point A to point B, within the building of 50 stories, you're going from your apartment, maybe to a communal dining hall, maybe to a communal playground for children, all in one building, and those 50 stories start becoming your community. And that is when in a city like ours, where land is so scarce and there's so much competition over space, that is probably the future. We can't expand anymore. We have no more room to expand, and the future is getting more and more crowded, smaller apartments, giving up the possessions that we don't really need on a daily basis, and sharing what we can with our other neighbors.
It's great. And so I should note that Hong Kong is actually doing that legislation now. Every 10 stories is going to have a communal space in it. So you got to, because they have obesity in kids, because they're not running in the streets, so you got to get them running in the buildings. I heard the bell. I got 5 minutes. Let me just ask, can I get one or two questions from the audience? And no questions, not comments, please. Any questions? Shirish, do you have a question? Okay. Yes, in the back, right there. Okay. A short one that we can react to.
Yeah, my name is Hari, and I think in the Indian context, our bazaar is an excellent model to study. And there is some bit of study that's happened in urban planning around Indian bazaar. Very efficient, community, and so on. The second comment, if I could, I've been sort of involved in city matters like water, energy, and so on, though it's not my day job. And when we look at how can Bangalore get to be Tel Aviv, the issue that we have is our citizens are not adequately engaged. In my view, I think it's a colonial legacy. At that point in time, it was the colonial departments which managed public good. After we got to be independent, we delegated it to our governments and local bodies. We just voted. I think that is changing. Citizens will demand accountability from local governments and state governments and so on and so forth. That's where I see hope.
The bazaar speaks.
think your comment on bazaars, on markets is absolutely perfect. We based our recuperation of some of our quarters in the recuperation of the markets as a public policy together with private sector. And this is something that we are talking about to do in Pune. We are doing that in Colombia, where they have wonderful markets. And just one comment, invest in to put technology in the oldest part of your city. Those parts are the ones that have more identity. Those are the parts in which the local talent, young talent, creativity will want to be. If I can choose between an old building full of history, inspiring me, or typical glass facade building of the last 10 years, I will go to the identity one for sure, even though I'm not young, but for sure the youngsters are gonna go there. So markets, old stones, technology, creativity, they all go together.
Other comments on that?
I just want to respond or agree with what the gentleman was saying about civic engagement. And this was spoken about in the last panel as well. And I think that part, so the future also means not just a vision of what something will look like, but the process of how do you get there. And I think that we've all learned that that involving communities early actually pays off in the end of developing the vision, but also getting real buy-in and commitment to their communities. So, you know, that's another thing that I think all of us as planners, whether we're developers or we're in government or we're nonprofits, should always continually think about how to engage the public in the process.
And on that note, I want to thank the panel very much. It's been a great conversation.
There are a couple of questions from our social media followers. The first one is for Mr. Kant. What is unique about India's urban growth according to you?
You know, to my mind, right now it's all important that our process has just begun. So, you know, in the next 4 to 5 decades, we'll see a huge amount of urbanization. And right now, it's pretty unplanned. And the future needs to be extremely well planned. It needs to be embedded with infrastructure. It needs to have better livability. And it needs better transportation and better technology. And I think urbanization is one area where India can, you know, leapfrog in many ways, learning from good examples of many countries. And we can create a lot of wealth, better livability, better creativity of the future through the process of urbanization.
Thank you. And the second one is for Mr. Mahindra. What are the aspects of city building you find most exciting?
That's the wrong question. The question is, what are the aspects I don't find exciting? That would be a shorter answer. But no, you know, I'm going to sound like a broken record. But it is about the interaction and the dynamics of people. It's exactly what I said earlier. I gave one example about the Harvard Graduate School of Design, but let me go to another one. When I first heard Charles Correa talk about one of his projects, the late Charles Correa, it was not about one of his monumental structures. He talked about pavement dwellers in Mumbai, and he said, before we keep talking about building visions for low-cost housing for them, he said, you know, they have a community there already. Why don't we just have a plan to, at every few meters, provide drinking water, to provide amenities to them, a little point where they can get electric power. Their lives are not being lived badly. They have communities. We just need to adapt to their communities. Again, a very, very seminal thing that stuck in my mind. And to me, that's excitement. It's not about brick or mortar. It's not about giant structures. It's not about Zaha Hadid and her monumental structures. It's about somebody listening to how people actually live. That's what excites me about planning.
Thank you. When it comes to new cities, there is no one-size-fits-all model. Each has their own particularities and degrees of freedom to explore. New cities cannot be fully planned before being built, either from a technology standpoint or from a socio-economic one. No matter how cutting-edge current technology might be, disruptive innovation can come at any moment and shadow past technologies. From a socio-economic standpoint, societies worldwide are experiencing major challenges in culture and identity that no planner can forecast. Creating what makes residents secure and happy can provide the way forward for new city builders to create unique urban environments where people thrive. Citizens will shape the city in which they live, and planners must allow them to do so. This is precisely the reason why, to some extent, city must be planned for flexibility. Flexibility means building today what is needed today and building tomorrow what is needed tomorrow. This sort of just-in-time approach to city building can facilitate the financing of new structure by capitalizing on growing land value and using taxing mechanisms to capture revenue. I now invite Ms. Anita Arjundas, MD and CEO of Mahindra Lifespace Developers Limited, to present mementos as a token of appreciation to our distinguished panelists. I request our panelists to remain on stage for a photo opportunity, please. It has been a delightful afternoon, and I feel privileged to have got an opportunity to host the third edition of Confluence, Mahindra World City's Thought Leadership Forum. I, on behalf of my colleagues at Mahindra Life Spaces and Mahindra World City, would like to thank our distinguished speakers and panelists for sharing their insights and their vision for creating cities of the future. We are sure we can work together and create a blueprint for successful city planning and governance for cities in India. We are greatly encouraged by some of the insights shared by colleagues from their countries, which have sown the seeds for creating successful communities, and we would continue to work together and create a pool of knowledge which will form the foundation of communities in the future. I wish to express our profuse thanks to the team at McKinsey, our knowledge partners, for their tireless efforts in harmonizing this orchestra and creating a symphony of the best minds. Today's session would not have been lively and insightful without the wholehearted participation of our distinguished guests and audience. We thank you for taking time off from your busy schedules to join us this afternoon. I also wish to express my sincere thanks to ICE Global, our event partners, ET Now, our media partners, the general manager and staff at Taj Mansingh for ensuring smooth the conduct of this event. To my colleagues at Mahindra World City and Mahindra Life Spaces, the sleepless nights and tireless efforts have paid off. I'm proud to be part of this wonderful team. Thank you for your support. Thank you all very much and have a great evening.